Good morning, everybody. We have folks coming in, and so be patient. We're going to get everybody into the Zoom room, and then we'll get started. Okay, good. All right. So happy Monday, everyone. My name is Whip Gully. I'm going to be the tech person, which is a bit of a stretch for this meeting because Brianna can't be with us, but give it another minute or two. Let's try and get everyone here. I appreciate you all being here. And so we'll get started in a minute.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Hey there. Hey, Webb.
Good morning or good day, Congressman. It's good to see you and have you with us. I was telling folks that I'm going to be the substitute tech person to get us started here in just a minute, but we got a lot of folks still trying to join us. So I'm asking folks to just be patient for another minute or two, and then we'll get going. If that's all right.
All right. I will. I'll be back as well. Okay.
Yep. All right. All right. Okay, well, it's 4 or 5 minutes after 12, and we have a big program today. And so let me just say, I'm Whip Gully. I work with the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit. I'm serving as a very inadequate substitute for the woman who is usually here managing our technical side of the virtual meetings. But it's great to see all of you. Appreciate you getting checked in. And I would say that sort of the ground rules we try and go by are to ask everyone to come on and stay on mute if you can while we go through the meeting. But as you have questions, certainly following the Congressman's remarks, but please feel free to put them into the chat, and we will try and take them up in the order that they appear there in the chat. And let's see, there's the last few folks joining us. Otherwise, it's great to have everyone. And I think with that introduction, Oh, let me say one more thing. The meeting is being recorded, and so anybody who I want everyone to know about that. And if anybody's uncomfortable with it, of course you can stop your video or don't have to stay and be a part of the meeting. But we hope you will. All right. That said, I want to turn the meeting over to our MC or facilitator today, and that's Marcia McNally. So, Marcia, take it away.
Thanks, Wib. Do you know that you're identified as Brianna Van Dalzen?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's an aspirational goal rather than a reality.
Okay. I would like to echo Wib and welcome everyone to this meeting. We have a big agenda as indicated. For those of you who would like to say hi to people, usually we go around the room, but we're not in the room. Go ahead and say hi in the chat. We have sort of three parts to our meeting. First is our spotlight, who I'll introduce in a minute. And then, of course, Congressman Price. And at the very end, we have updates that are just sort of updates on the ongoing activities of the organization. So our spotlight today is Rachel Eberhard. And among the many hats that she wears, she works for CASA, which most of us know about as a very important organization in our area providing affordable housing. But I'll let Rachel explain that to you briefly. Rachel, turning it over to you.
Great, thank you, Marcia. I'm happy to be with you all today. I appreciate the invitation to come and share some of the updates about what we're doing for CASA. And I know many of you are familiar with the work that we do, but for those who might not already be familiar, we're a nonprofit housing provider focused on providing access to stable, affordable housing for those who are homeless or at risk. And we develop and manage rental communities to help support them. So currently we're managing nearly 500 affordable apartments and homes across the Triangle. We currently have a little over 180 apartment units in the pipeline for new development right now, and we're aiming to add 500 more units by 2025. So right now in my role as a real estate developer with CASA, we're focused on kind of scaling and building more units, which means more homes for the Triangle's most vulnerable residents. So I wanted to kind of highlight two projects in particular that we're working on right now. The first is over in Orange County. It's called Perry Place. And this is CASA's first 9% tax credit project, and it straddles the town border between Chapel Hill and Carrboro. It provides 48 units, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and aims to serve individuals and families earning less than 60% AMI. So the funding for Perry Place, primarily for the land and pre-development costs right now, it was provided by Orange County, the town of Chapel Hill, town of Carrboro, and Stroud Roses Foundation. And this project was named in memory of Velma Perry. She was a North Side leader and prominent activist. So the reason why I bring up this particular project is since it is our first 9% tax credit project, and there is legislation right now being proposed through the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act of 2021 that's currently being considered by both the House and the Senate. So these tax credit deals, I think, are really going to be a big focus for us as we kind of look to hit that 500 more unit goal that we have. And this piece of legislation we're particularly excited about, since the provisions of the bill could finance as much as 2 million additional affordable rental homes over the next 10 years. So the second project I want to quickly mention, and I know most of you have heard about this project, especially is over in Wake County. It's called Kings Ridge. And so in fall 2019, CASA purchased 6 acres of land in Raleigh near Wake Medical Center. And this particular parcel is within the transit overlay district, considered with the New Bern Wake BRT line that's proposed. And so Kings Ridge will be 100 apartments of permanent supportive housing. And so these units are targeting single adults and families experiencing homelessness. Will also be providing on-site support services, as well as case management and community space. And this particular project as well, it kind of leverages a public-private funding model. So we're applying for bond funds at the end of this month, and we're currently about halfway through a $15 million capital campaign that will help us fund construction. So Kings Ridge 2 is special for us because it's named in memory of CASA's longtime CEO, Deborah King, who I know many of you are familiar with. So that's just kind of a quick rundown of two of the, I want to say probably 6 to 8 projects we have going on right now across the Triangle. And we just really support groups like the coalition and the advocacy that you all provide us. It really helps us in achieving our mission. And again, my name's Rachel Eberhard, and I'm happy to drop my contact information in the chat if any of you would like to connect offline or in the future. And so again, we really appreciate having the opportunity to be the spotlight today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel. It's good to hear about things that you all are doing throughout the region in addition to Durham. So now I feel like I should have a drum roll. I'm going to turn this over to Rita McDaniel and John Talmadge, who are our moderators for the piece of the program that is devoted to Congressman Price. Rita and John, take it away.
Rita, are you able to take yourself off mute now and do the introduction?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. I apologize.
We can hear you, Rita.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm getting my fingers stuck, so I apologize, but I'm ready. Okay. I am so happy to introduce, thank you. I apologize, you all. I'm in the hospital. I am happy to introduce David Price. He represents North Carolina's 4th District. That includes Durham, Franklin, and Granville in Orange County, as well as parts of Chatham and Wake and Vance counties. He has a long history in this area, having received his undergraduate degree at UNC Chapel Hill and teaching political science and public policy at Duke University, after earning a Bachelor of Divinity and PhD in political science at Yale University. He began serving his term in Congress in 1987 and currently serves on the House of Appropriation Committees and is the chairman of Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Appropriation Subcommittee. His constituents know him as a strong supporter of education, accessible healthcare, affordable housing, clean air and water, and improved transportation alternative. David is a native of Erwin, Tennessee. He and his wife live in Chapel Hill and are parents of 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Welcome, David Price.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's good to be with all of you and to get the update about the good work of CASA and also to get to know the work of the Durham Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit better. Longtime friend Wib Gully, thank you for being the impresario today and getting us going. I've been asked to give an overview, a bird's eye view of the picture with respect to housing and transit and the kind of issues we're dealing with, everything from pandemic recovery to the issues of equity and resiliency, safety, the kind of issue threads that go through the housing and transit appropriations and the legislative issues. So I'll do that as best I can very quickly, talk about some vehicles for what we hope will be positive changes that are now moving along, but then leave time for whatever kind of questions you want to raise. And I'll leave it to you how much time we have and how we deal with that. But we all know that that we had we had a real crunch in our transportation system, especially our desire in the triangle, often frustrated desire to diversify our transportation system, to make it serve all of our community more equitably. And the same is even more true of housing. We've been faced for a long time with a shortage of affordable housing, with the phenomena of gentrification. I mean, downtown renewal, of course, has its positive aspects, but it also has its negative aspects when if we're gentrifying and driving communities out into the suburbs and beyond. People who serve our communities and ought to be able to live close in within our communities. We know that phenomenon is real all across the triangle, and that it needs to be addressed. And you know, these problems were very much with us, very evident. Many people, including you, dealing with these things before the pandemic hit. But the pandemic has, as it has in so many areas, it's laid bare the inequities, the disparities that we are experiencing, and has made it very urgent matter to, of course, get ourselves, our communities, to the other side of this pandemic, but also to build back better in a way that is more equitable, is more resilient, and will serve our needs for the future. We'll talk about the efforts that are underway in the Congress right now, just because there are several, and they do have a kind of complicated interrelationship. But my starting point will be our budget for 2022. I am the chairman now of once again of the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee, which means that we have a piece of that budget, and that whatever else we do in the form of investment legislation, and I hope we're going to do a great deal. I hope the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, these major presidential initiatives, I hope that they will, in some large form or to a large degree, will come to fruition. But in the meantime, we do have the budget, which is reflective of many of these priorities, and which we know one way or another will be enacted. And so that's my first priority right now, is writing a transportation HUD appropriations bill for 2022 that addresses our pressing needs and provides, you might say, a down payment on these broader investments that we're dealing with. We do have, I think, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the killing of George Floyd and the kind of racial reckoning that has followed that across the country, and also the increasing realization of climate change and its consequences. Just what a crisis that represents for our generation and for our country and its politics. You know, these things are converging on us, and they do demand a great deal of us. And so we have to be aware of how the policy mistakes of the past need to be reckoned with. I mean, that's certainly evident in the case of Durham, North Carolina, and the way urban renewal was done, the way the Durham Freeway bisected an established Black community. And you know, that's a national phenomenon. And actually, President Biden in his budget proposes to dedicate certain funding to rectifying those abuses of the past, which have to do with the way transportation policy was carried out, and of course the way federal housing policy was carried out. It often added to disparities and discrimination rather than taking them away. Hopefully we've now reversed this, with federal policy being a major corrective to some of the patterns we need to deal with, but it hasn't always been that way. And so we need to pay some attention to our history and how you correct those things, as well as how you build back better going forward. We will have in our THUD bill, as we call it, that is Transportation HUD bill, we will have some down payments on the rescue plan and some characteristic emphases. I'll just tell you what some of those are. Some of these I have carried with me into the chairmanship. I have been able for some years now to push for the rebuilding of the Choice Neighborhoods program. That's the old Hope 6 program. It had a mixed history, but the Hope 6 program, which of course was applied in Durham and Raleigh, the Hope 6 program was a major investment in our cities that didn't have it was unique, I think, in the HUD portfolio. So doing it right, I think, is important, and bringing that program back into a more robust state is important. And I would say the same thing about the programs for housing for the elderly, the so-called 202 program for elderly housing. A good local example of that is on the grounds of St. Joseph's AME Church on Fayetteville Street. That those 40 units of rental housing for the elderly, that was a 202 program back in the day. There are a number of examples around the Triangle. That program, pretty much with sequestration and Republican rule, well, we maintained existing units, but didn't do anything else. We want to bring that back into production. Same goes for the Section 811 housing for people with disabilities. There are also examples of that kind of investment around the Triangle that needs to be revived. HOPWA program, the housing for people with AIDS. I managed to get a formula improvement written in so that North Carolina and other localities get a more accurate allocation of those funds, more commensurate with our caseload of HIV/AIDS. But that needs to be funded. I mean, there's a whole range of things which. Yes, I hope the American Jobs Plan will give all of this a boost, but in the meantime, we got to do it year by year. And that's what we try to do in the appropriations bill. I've also particularly wanted to fund all the new starts, all the transit new starts and the small starts. We're taking advantage of the small starts program as we speak. We've heard about the New Bern Avenue BRT line in Raleigh with some affordable housing along the way. That's a good project. That's a small start. We're hoping that as we recover from the failure of our light rail effort here in Durham and Chapel Hill, that we will have a commuter rail project across the spine of the Triangle that that does qualify for a new start. And I'd like nothing better than to be able to advocate very energetically for a new start for our region as we get a regional multimodal transit plan in place for the Triangle. And I'm anxious about that. I'm sure you are as well. We have others that worked on this for so long. We've had some false starts. We now need a real new start and one that will leave us a generation from now saying that it's a good thing that we decided it wasn't enough just to pave another lane out on I-40, but that we really needed to develop a flexible and equitable transportation system that serves our entire community. Let me just briefly indicate what these other major initiatives look like. The American Jobs Plan is the one you've probably heard most about, AKA the Recovery Bill. This is a plan for major investment in all modes of transportation. It also conceives of infrastructure in a very broad way, and I think a very defensively broad way. Yes, we need to invest in all modes of transportation, and that includes our needs locally, needs out of the airport. It includes, of course, our need for intercity rail, and the next step in this region is going to be Raleigh to Richmond, so that we have a good, fast, high-speed rail service in the Southeast Corridor. It includes needed highway work, but also, of course, transit, both bus transit and rail transit. All of these things need to be invested in and are invested in the American Jobs Plan. It also includes broadband. I would imagine there's no dissent on this call from the notion that broadband is infrastructure, and that it is a area of infrastructure where the inequities are particularly glaring at this moment. I mean, the pandemic has just made that so stark, with the need to have kids kids not physically in school, having to learn online, the need for telemedicine, the disparities in economic development prospects in our state by virtue of broadband access and so on. We've just got to fix this. And I think we got to conceive of broadband as the previous generations conceived of rural electrification. I think it's become that basic. And the president realizes that it's a critical component of the American Jobs Plan, broadband. And we're talking about urban and rural broadband. We're talking about people being able to afford and access broadband, as well as broadband being available and accessible in all kinds of communities. Housing is infrastructure. I need to say that again and again. We do say it again and again. Housing and community development are infrastructure. Some of the discussions that are underway in the Congress right now, trying to get a bipartisan approach to this, I don't know how well that's going to go. It's pretty hard, pretty difficult, I would say. And one of the main sticking points is that our Republican friends don't seem to want to regard housing as infrastructure. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's a non-starter. Housing is infrastructure. We have an affordable housing crisis in this country. The pandemic has made it worse. There are long waiting lists for Section 8 and for other supported housing. The number of people in our community that should be eligible for housing support and are getting it is only 1 out of 4. You ask yourself, well, what about the other 3 of those 4? You know, what's happening to them? Well, I'll tell you, they're paying 50, 60% of their income in rent. That's what's happening. Or they have substandard deficient housing to start with. It is not acceptable. The pandemic has made it worse. We have to address this, and this is the opportunity. As I said, in various aspects of my appropriations bill, I didn't mention our beefing up of Section 8. We're doing that as well. Our addressing of the disgraceful backlog in public housing maintenance and upkeep, visible in Durham, of course, with the McDougal Terrace disaster. Believe me, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the investments across the board in all kinds of housing programs, that's part of our regular appropriations bill, but it most certainly needs to be part of any national infrastructure initiative. Also included in the American Jobs Plan is water and sewer infrastructure, the electric grid, and the home care, healthcare infrastructure. All of that is part of the Jobs Plan. And then beyond that, there's the American Families Plan, which deals with pre-K education, with childcare, with a range of other community needs. There's a huge agenda, and it is by and large, I would say, it's not just post-pandemic recovery. A lot of this is a long-term equity and equity agenda, and built into it also is sensitivity to climate change and resiliency and mitigation in the face of climate change. All of these things are at issue in these major initiatives, which we're struggling now to figure out how to implement in Washington. This, of course, we have had one major success, and I don't want to overlook that. We've had the American Rescue Plan, the Relief Plan, directly pegged to pandemic relief. And there's been support for transit, support for housing. We need to, by the way, close that housing support gap in the next few weeks, because the rental assistance that we did provide is there's a danger it will not arrive in time to avoid these evictions that are likely to come once the moratorium expires on evictions. There's a gap there that it's very, very urgent that we have to close. But we do have some help that has been given, and it is on the way with the relief plan. That was a $1.9 trillion program, which in most years would count as a pretty good year's work. It's only in this context of the pandemic and these long deferred investments. It's only in that context that this appears to be the beginning. And there's so much more that needs to be done. I do think the advent of a new administration, the exit of the old administration, but also the advent of a new administration and of Democratic majorities in the House and Senate, as narrow as those majorities may be, I do think this gives us an opening. But you read the daily news as enough to know that nothing's simple, and that there are a lot of issues. I'll be happy to address these kind of practical questions if you want to talk about them, about where it looks to me that things stand. But I don't think I need to persuade you of the stakes of being very high in all this. And certainly the initiatives have been articulated and have been put out there. And now the question is, how much of this can we deliver? And what's it going to mean locally? I mean, that's your focus as a coalition. I understand that. One of the reasons that I've been attracted to transportation and housing policy ever since I first came to the Congress is because of the very powerful local impact. There's these policy areas, these funding areas are quite central to the future of Durham and the future of the Triangle, because and we have a lot of self-help going on in the sense of a major housing bond, for example. And I think we're back on track now with regional transit planning. That's a test that still lies ahead, but we seem to be on the way back there. We have the work of CASA. I'm glad that we heard the report from CASA. There are others where that came from. The HIC, the Passage Home, the various nonprofits who have become quite expert in going after this federal money or the federal tax credits and piecing these deals together so that we end up with affordable housing for our community. And we have a lot going for us here. But you do need a federal government that is present and accounted for, that is a reliable partner. And that's what I would like to help provide, both through our annual appropriations and also by these major national initiatives that the president is pursuing. So I won't go into all the details of this. I'll be happy to answer questions that you have or hear your comments. But I appreciate your good work. I appreciate the chance to talk to you today about this kind of status report. That's the way I look at it, I suppose. We're certainly midstream on these efforts, and with a lot hanging in the balance as we return to Washington and try to work on these things in the weeks ahead. So thank you for your advocacy and the kind of information you help spread around, and the enthusiasm you help generate. And I'll be happy to respond to your comments and questions.
Thank you, Representative Price. We really appreciate you sharing the perspective of federal legislation and the work that you're doing to move these issues forward. We have some questions. I want to start with one related to transportation reauthorization, which I know that you're working on and have gotten some local projects successfully in passing committee with earmarks, including some transit and the Durham Beltline Trail here in Durham. But in a previous meeting, we had some videos and have had comments from transit riders talking about the need for more service. And of course, we have a half-cent sales tax where that planning is going forward. But as I think you know Representative Hank Johnson of Georgia introduced a bill earlier this month that would create a new funding program for transit operations. And the estimate is in Durham that could generate $25 to $30 million a year if it was as broad as introduced, and that would translate into 40 to 50% more service hours, really improving the access that transit riders have. And so the question for you is, will you be willing to be a co-sponsor of that bill and to support it as it moves through the process in legislature?
Well, I'll be very happy to look at that. I think I'm not quite sure what Hank Johnson is proposing. But the main need that presses itself on me is the need for funding and for adequate development of transit around the country. That, of course, involves operating funds, and there has been some. We've been able to write in pandemic-related operating funds to keep transit systems going across the country, and keep their payrolls intact, and to have them more or less ready to resume operations as we get past the pandemic. There's been a good bit of funding for that. I'd say it's one of the more successful efforts in terms of pandemic relief. But then the question, I'm sure, for Hank Johnson and others going forward is, what does transit look like in the future? And in particular, how do we make transit more serviceable to the entire community and more equitable in terms of the kind of access people have for transit? So I'll certainly look at his proposal, but my main emphasis at the moment is on getting transit generously funded, both the operating funds and the New Start funds and the Small Start funds. All of these things need to be robust in our annual appropriations bill, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure that they are. And then they are all areas of investment in the American Jobs Plan. And there too, we just need to take those proposals very, very seriously.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking a look at that proposal to expand operating funding for transit. This question came in from Anthony Scott, our CEO of the Durham Housing Authority. You mentioned that there's proposed funding in the infrastructure bill for housing. Will the congressional legislation specify how the funds can be used, or will that determination be left to HUD to decide which programs will be funded and how much for each program?
Well, first I want to thank Anthony Scott for his good work and for the efforts of the Durham Housing Authority, which of course we count on for that full spectrum of housing support. One thing you can say about our housing portfolio is that it is diverse. One size does not fit all, and we don't assume that one size fits all. Our needs go all the way from dealing with this disgraceful backlog in the maintenance of public housing and the support of people who depend on that kind of housing, all the way up to the home program and the CDBG program and others that promote home ownership and kind of everything in between. And much of that is the responsibility of our housing authority. We're grateful for their good work. The answer to Anthony's question is that there's some of both. In other words, there will be in our annual appropriations bill, as there always is, and I would imagine in the jobs plan, the jobs an assignment of funding to different categories of housing, just like we assign it to different modes of transportation. So we're looking to not just fully fund the existing Section 8 contracts, and we're having to eat about $4 billion in costs as those rental costs go up before we even get started with new contracts. But we're going to not only fund the existing contracts, we're going to expand, I hope, I hope in the hundreds of thousands, the availability of Section 8 across the country, because hundreds of thousands of people are on those waiting lists, as we all know. Both the annual appropriation and the jobs plan would make a major dent in the public housing maintenance backlog. McDougall Terrace, I mean, that's, as I said, the tip of the iceberg. That's a carbon monoxide poisoning hazard that arises from this general deficiency, I would say, in maintaining our public housing stock. But that's just the most acute and emergency kind of aspect of this. Public housing maintenance needs are something like $70 billion, believe it or not, nationwide. That's incredible. And so that's a high priority for both annual appropriations and a major jobs bill or investment bill. There is money in both for the elderly housing that I mentioned, the housing for people with disabilities, for the choice neighborhoods, you know, the array of HUD programs. Now, within those, what Anthony's getting at, I imagine, is there is some flexibility in terms of what housing authorities can undertake. In Durham, there's been particular interest in converting some of the public housing stock into essentially into rental Section 8 type units. There are some incentives in the federal budget for doing that, but it's sometimes complicated. There will continue to be, of course, some flexibility for housing authorities to pursue that or other things that they might deem to be in the interest of their local program.
Thank you, Dave Price, for being here. There's a question about how much responsibility does fall on the federal government as far as keeping up public housing such as McDougall Terrace, and to ensure that their public housing is safe, healthy, and comfortable?
Well, it's a shared responsibility, and as I've said, the lack of funding for this is a disgrace, and that lies squarely on the shoulders of the federal government, in my opinion. I just think we got to understand that, take responsibility for it, and rectify it. I've been doing ever since I became ranking member and then chairman of the committee. We have increased the public housing capital fund, as we call it. We've increased it each year, but it's incremental, and there needs to be a major investment in this, and that's what the American Jobs Plan would provide. Even the American Jobs Plan, I don't think provides enough. I think it's something like $40 billion, and the need is almost twice that much. But I tell you, I would take 40 billion, and we would make very good use of 40 billion in Durham and other places. Now, the specific application of these funds, and in dealing with the hazards that may manifest themselves, like carbon monoxide poisoning or radon poisoning or lead poisoning. I mean, there's some pretty awful problems that manifest themselves. Of course, they're not going to be federal authorities that come in and do all that. The local housing authority, the people who are managing these properties, have to assume responsibility as well for identifying and rectifying hazards and setting some priorities as to how the funds that are available are spent. So that's what I mean when I say it's a shared responsibility.
Thank you, Representative Price. I want to try and fold a few different comments and questions together here. There are a couple of Vanessa Evans and Angela Vick-Lewis have both mentioned that we need more bus service to get to grocery stores, to get to work, to get around town. And together with a comment from Becky Weiners, can you talk about how racial equity is working its way into the discussion about federal legislation for funding for transportation and housing, and maybe even some of the policies being discussed as part of the transportation reauthorization bill.
Yes, the the issue of racial equity has been part of this discussion for a long time, of course, but I do think it's become more acute and a greater level of awareness and sensitivity since the events of last summer, most particularly the killing of George Floyd and the national reckoning that has followed that. I had a hearing, my first hearing as in this Congress for our THUD subcommittee was a hearing on equity. And we brought in people who could speak to historical inequities, things like the way urban renewal sliced through the Black communities across this country, and Durham is a very convincing example of that. Often gets mentioned, but far from the only example. I mean, Winston-Salem was also an example. There are plenty of and of course the whole history of the Federal Housing Administration and the way that discrimination was baked into the early public housing programs. It was institutionalized. So in both transportation and housing, you have a history of public policy making the disparities worse, not better. And that's a history we need to reckon with and need to correct. And as I mentioned earlier, there are aspects in the jobs plan that aim at this quite directly. It's an interesting feature of what the president's proposed, and exactly how we do this is challenging. But at least there's the desire to deal with that historical legacy quite directly. But then, of course, going forward, I think we need to fully appreciate the racial dimensions of the more general inequities and inequalities we're dealing with, and as we locally and nationally, locally at the state level and nationally, at all these levels of government, build this goal of racial equity quite directly into our planning and our prioritizing of how we're going to spend our money, including federal money.
Thank you, Representative Price. I appreciate that response. It's core to the work that we're doing here at the local level, and glad to know that you're looking at that and concerned about it at the federal level. I think that we are just about out of time. I don't think we have time for one more question. So Marcia, I want to return it to you and thank you again, Representative Price. If we can give him virtual applause. We know that if we were in person, we would all be clapping for you. We appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with us. So I'll turn it back to you, Marcia.
Okay, thanks, John. So we have a few updates. Larissa, you're going to start with about the eviction moratorium.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. The Durham Emergency Rental Assistance Program is taking applications for people who've had any kind of hardship really during COVID and are now behind on rent or utilities. And also people who are homeless who need funds to get housing. And so I'm putting into the chat the Durham ERAP website. You can Google Durham ERAP. So ERAP stands for Emergency Rental Assistance. It can also stand for Electronic Rental Assistance Program. They had some trouble with their program. If you know people who have applied, basically they're telling people if it was submitted, if they got that message, it was submitted, please be patient because the electronic approvals are not working. They're having to review every application by hand. In the meantime, we've got some time. Angel, are you available to talk about the extension of the local moratorium on evictions due to rent? I think Angel had to jump off. Okay, so I'll do the part that Angel's really been working with Judge Patricia Evans, who has agreed to extend the local Durham eviction moratorium for rent through the end of August. So that means no hearings on evictions if there's money involved for rent. Other evictions can go forward. And it may be extended longer. The intent is to give people, tenants, the opportunity to apply for the emergency rental assistance program and for their landlords to get paid the back rent. And they can also go forward if they don't use all 12 months of back rent. They can go forward 3 months and then even another 3 months if they didn't use more than 9 or 6 months of back rent. They can actually get help moving forward. So it's a really amazing program. Slow to get started, but hopefully it will help many people. And then the next round of funding, which I think the city and county just received from the Biden administration, will also help another large group of tenants. And we're hopeful that we'll continue to get funding from federal government to be able to help everyone stay in their homes. Thank you.
Thanks, Larissa. Thanks for your vigilance on this. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Savara, who has also been extremely vigilant on the topic of longtime homeowner tax assistance. Jim?
Thank you very much. We are pleased to be able to announce that there is a much improved proposal for tax assistance that was developed by the county this year. This is for longtime 10-year or more homeowners at extremely low income, up to 30% of the area median income. The program would cover half of the property tax bill up to a limit of $750. And the county approved this program when they approved their budget last Monday night. The city council was willing to follow our urging that more people will be helped by increasing the income limit to 60% area median income, and that the grant size be increased as well. And I think there would have been a clear majority in the council that would have supported these changes. But the county commission has already approved the proposal in its original form, and the city council is going to stay with that proposal. County staff and commissioners are saying we are committed to looking at expansion of this program in the future. We're seeing this as a trial effort. So one of our important focus, an important focus for us as we move forward, will be to help with outreach, encouraging people to apply for the program, getting all those who could be eligible to take advantage of it, and then using that to demonstrate that we need to help more and provide assistance. By the way, the federal funding that we are receiving, city and county are receiving, could be used for higher level of expenses than have been planned for. So a good step forward, and we will keep after this and try to expand it in the future.
Thanks, Jim. Let's see, I'm up next on Northgate redevelopment. For those of you who haven't been to one of our meetings before, the coalition has been working with the Walltown Community Association and its partner, the Northgate Mall Neighborhood Council, and folks from North Carolina, NC State School of Design, on preparing an equitable development, shall we say, alternative to the development of Northgate Mall. Their most recent activity has been to garner support through first a survey, then a sign-on, an online sign-on campaign, and now to ask organizations for support of their efforts. And so, as is the case when we have requests that are outside of our monthly cycle, the coalition's coordinating committee sent this letter last week, and I'm going to read it quickly. The Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit strongly supports the Walltown Community Association and the Northgate Mall Neighborhood Council in their efforts to have significant affordable housing and other community benefits as part of the redevelopment of the Northgate site. It seems clear that low-income, long-time Walltown homeowners should be part of the city and county's program of grants to assist with property tax payments, which Jim just talked about. Finally, we support all other reasonable measures that the city can take to assist the neighborhoods in the Northgate area in achieving more affordable housing and transit for their residents as part of this redevelopment and to offset the negative effects of gentrification. Okay, John, do you have an update on the transit equity campaign? A quick one.
Very quick, we are still expecting the Regional Transportation Organization, the transit agency, and the county to be releasing their scenarios, their investment scenarios for public input any day now. It was at one point going to happen last week, so I would expect it happens before the end of the month. And we will be working to educate people about the process, about how to interpret the information that's put out so that they can engage in this process this summer.
Okay, thanks. And not on the agenda, but I received message that Wib Gully would like to say something as we close.
Yeah, a couple of quick things. One is that a lot of you are familiar with the effort at 505 West Chapel Hill Street to move forward with redevelopment that includes a significant affordable housing component. And I think at our last meeting, monthly meeting, we didn't say this, so I want to make sure, is it looks like the beginning of the process of finding a new development team will start this fall on that. And we'll be monitoring that, working with Ken and the churches in the area and others to try and make sure that the commitment to affordable housing stays strong, but we have no doubt that it will. We think the council will be firm on that. And the other thing is just to say, Congressman Price, what a treat it is to have you, and we appreciate your time. A lot of folks may not know this, but when you head one of the appropriations subcommittees in the House, the positions in the old days, we used to refer to it as one of the 12 cardinals in the House. So it's, the Roman Catholic Church may not be the best analogy, but it indicates the senior position. And we're so grateful, not just for you being there and for your leadership, but the kind of thoughtful, detailed knowledge, as a lot of my friends have pointed out, that you have about Durham, about this region, about housing and transportation and the needs, and try to so much to get something done. So thank you very much
Thank you
for that. There's in the emails that you got notice about our upcoming meetings of the coalition. We hope everyone will feel free to take advantage of that. And with that, Marcia, I'll turn it back over to you.
I was only going to point everyone's attention to the upcoming meetings next in July 19th, healthcare, homelessness, and housing linkages. And Terry Allenbaugh from our group will talk about a new coalition that's being formed around the nexus of those things. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming, and Congressman Price, and see you hopefully in a month, if not before. Bye.
Marcia, could I just add about
Yes,
upcoming
sorry.
meetings? The policy committee will meet next Tuesday evening at 5 o'clock. We hope we will have the transit scenarios to discuss next week as a key topic.
Okay.
So the notice will go out to the standard mailing list about that meeting.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim.
Angel, just a sec. Angel Vic Lewis, yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had another meeting.
It's
I would just like to really say quickly, thank Judge Evans for all she has done for continuously expanding and the moratorium for this eviction thing, because this is very serious. It's gonna really affect a lot of Durham residents. And the last thing that we really need is for anyone else to be homeless in Durham. So she has extended it. I think this is like the third time. So I would really like to say thank you to her and everyone else that's helping out with that to keep our residents in their homes. So.
And thank you too,
Thanks,
Angel
Angela.
Vic Lewis. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Y'all have a great day. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask.
okay.
Great day.
Bye, everyone. We're ending at exactly 1 o'clock. Have a good afternoon. Bye.